While I was there, well, these men, kind of guests, you might say, well, we'd get together and horse around a little bit and sing.
Shocking Elvis performance caught on camera for the first time. June 19th, 1977, Omaha, Nebraska. The Civic Auditorium is packed with 12,000 fans who have no idea they're about to witness something that will be hidden from the world for nearly 5 decades. They came to see Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, deliver another electrifying performance. What they got instead was something far more disturbing, far more human, and far more heartbreaking than any concert they could have imagined. The lights dimmed at exactly 8:30 that evening. The orchestra hit the opening notes of Also Sprach Zarathustra, that iconic buildup that signaled Elvis was about to take the stage. Thousands of camera flashes exploded across the arena like lightning. Women screamed. Men whistled. The energy was electric, pulsing through every seat in that auditorium. And then Elvis appeared. But something was wrong. The man who stepped into that spotlight was not the Elvis these fans had seen on album covers or in movies. He was heavier, yes, but that wasn't what made people freeze in their seats. It was his eyes. Witnesses who were there that night would later describe them as hollow, distant, like he was looking through the crowd rather than at them. His famous jumpsuit, white with elaborate gold embroidery, seemed to hang differently on his frame. He gripped the microphone stand not with his usual confidence, but like a man steadying himself against a storm only he could feel. The band kicked into the first number, and Elvis began to sing. But within minutes, those closest to the stage noticed something unprecedented. His voice cracked, not once, but repeatedly. Elvis Presley, the man with one of the most powerful voices in music history, was struggling to hold a note. The backup singers exchanged nervous glances. The band members kept playing, but their eyes kept drifting to the man at center stage, silently asking the same question: what is happening? Here's what makes this night different from every other Elvis performance ever recorded. This entire concert was filmed. Multiple cameras captured every angle, every moment, every crack in the facade of the king. This was supposed to be premium content, footage that would be sold and celebrated for generations. Instead, within 48 hours of this performance, every single tape vanished. The film canisters were collected, locked away, and according to multiple sources within Elvis's organization, orders came from the highest levels to ensure this footage never saw the light of day. Someone very powerful decided that what happened on that stage in Omaha needed to be erased from history. And for almost 50 years, they succeeded. But why? What could possibly be so damaging, so revealing, that Elvis's own team would bury professional concert footage? After all, this was a man who had been filmed hundreds of times. His performances were legendary, studied, celebrated. What made this night so different that it needed to disappear? The answer lies in what Elvis did approximately 40 minutes into that concert. Something so unexpected, so raw, and so completely out of character that the audience didn't know whether to applaud or cry. He stopped performing, not because of a technical issue, not because of a medical emergency that anyone could see. He simply stopped, stood at the edge of that stage, and began to speak. What he said in those next several minutes has been recounted by audience members, bootleg audio collectors, and even a few crew members who broke their silence decades later. And every single account describes the same thing. Elvis Presley, the most guarded celebrity of his generation, the man whose image was controlled down to the last detail, began telling the truth about his life, about his pain, about what was really happening behind the curtain of fame. The audience sat in stunned silence. Some people openly wept. Others shifted uncomfortably in their seats, unsure if they were witnessing a breakdown or a breakthrough. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every word, every trembling hand gesture, every moment of vulnerability from a man the world thought they knew. Backstage, panic erupted. Handlers whispered frantically into walkie-talkies. Colonel Tom Parker, Elvis's notorious manager, was reportedly screaming at anyone within earshot. This was not the show. This was not the product. This was a man unraveling in front of 12,000 witnesses and multiple broadcast-quality cameras. What you're about to learn changes the Elvis story forever, because the king wasn't performing that night. He was breaking. And everything that happened in that arena, everything that was said and sung and revealed, explains why this footage was buried so deep that most historians didn't even know it existed. But to understand what happened on that stage, you need to know what was happening behind the curtain. And trust me, it's darker than you think. To understand why Elvis shattered on that Omaha stage, you need to rewind the clock about 6 months. Because what was happening inside Graceland and inside Elvis's inner circle during the first half of 1977 was nothing short of a slow-motion disaster. Everyone around him saw the warning signs. Nobody did a thing to stop it. Let's start with the man pulling the strings. Colonel Tom Parker had controlled Elvis's career for over 2 decades by this point, and controlled is not an exaggeration. Parker decided which movies Elvis made, which songs he recorded, which interviews he gave, and most importantly, which tours he would perform. By 1977, Parker had Elvis locked into a grueling schedule that would have broken a healthy man in his prime. Elvis was neither healthy nor in his prime. He was 42 years old, battling multiple chronic health conditions and consuming a pharmacy's worth of prescription medications every single day. And Parker's response to all of this was to book more shows. The financial pressure was suffocating. What most fans didn't know at the time was that Parker had gambling debts that reached into the millions. The Colonel needed Elvis on stage generating revenue, regardless of what it was doing to his health, his voice, or his mind. Every concert was another payment against Parker's losses. Elvis wasn't performing anymore. He was being harvested. Inside Graceland, the situation was equally dire. The Memphis Mafia, that infamous group of friends and employees who surrounded Elvis, had transformed from companions into enablers. They saw Elvis deteriorating daily. They watched him struggle to stay awake during conversations. They noticed his weight fluctuating wildly, his mood swinging from euphoric to despondent within hours. And what did they do? They kept the pills coming. They kept the doctors on call. They kept telling Elvis exactly what he wanted to hear because their paychecks depended on keeping the king happy. Priscilla had left years earlier, but she remained connected through their daughter Lisa Marie. In interviews decades later, Priscilla would admit that she knew something terrible was coming. She had seen Elvis during visits with Lisa Marie and barely recognized the man she had once married. The spark was gone. The humor had faded. What remained was a shell going through the motions of being Elvis Presley while the real man inside was drowning. The weeks leading up to that Omaha concert were particularly brutal. Elvis had been performing almost non-stop, dragging himself from city to city while his body screamed for rest. His voice was giving out regularly during shows. He had collapsed backstage at least twice, incidents that were quickly hushed up and attributed to dehydration or exhaustion. The truth was far more serious, but acknowledging that truth would have meant canceling shows, and canceling shows meant Parker didn't get paid. Then came the specific pressure point that made June 19th different. Elvis did not want to perform that night. Multiple sources confirmed that he fought against doing the Omaha show. He complained of chest pains. He said his voice wasn't ready. He begged for just a few days off to recover. The answer from Parker's camp was absolute. The show would go on. The contracts were signed. The tickets were sold. Elvis Presley would take that stage whether he wanted to or not. What happened in his dressing room before the concert has been described by 2 different witnesses who were present. Elvis sat in front of his mirror, barely moving, staring at his own reflection like he was looking at a stranger. His hands trembled as someone helped him into his jumpsuit. When asked if he was ready, Elvis reportedly said something that chilled everyone in that room. He said he was going to give them a show they would never forget. The way he said it made it clear he wasn't talking about entertainment. He walked onto that stage knowing exactly what he was going to do. And it wasn't what anyone expected. The cameras were rolling. The lights hit him. And then Elvis did something no one had ever seen before. The first 30 minutes of that Omaha concert followed the standard Elvis formula. He opened with C.C. Rider, moved through a few up-tempo numbers, and delivered the hits that fans expected. But anyone paying close attention could sense something building beneath the surface. His movements were slower than usual. His banter with the audience felt forced, almost mechanical. The legendary Elvis charisma was flickering like a bulb about to burn out. Then came the moment that changed everything. Elvis was supposed to transition into Hound Dog, one of his signature crowd pleasers. The band hit the opening notes. The audience erupted in anticipation. And Elvis just stood there. He didn't move. He didn't sing. He simply raised his hand, and the music stumbled to a confused halt. 12,000 people fell silent, unsure if this was part of the show or something else entirely. What happened next has been pieced together from audience recordings, crew testimonies, and the fragments of official footage that eventually surfaced decades later. Elvis walked to the very edge of the stage, closer to the crowd than his security team preferred. He looked out at those thousands of faces, took a breath that seemed to carry the weight of his entire life, and began to speak. He talked about being tired, not the kind of tired that sleep fixes, but a bone-deep exhaustion that had been building for years. He talked about feeling trapped inside a life that everyone else controlled. He mentioned people he trusted who had betrayed that trust, though he never named names. His voice cracked as he described waking up some mornings and not recognizing the man in the mirror. The audience sat frozen, unsure whether they were witnessing a confession or a breakdown. Then Elvis did something unprecedented. He asked the band to play Unchained Melody, a song that wasn't even on the set list. His pianist began the gentle opening chords, and Elvis returned to the microphone. What followed was not a performance, it was an exorcism. His voice, which had been struggling throughout the tour, somehow found a power and emotion that defied explanation. Every note carried decades of pain, loneliness, and longing. Tears streamed down his face as he sang, and he made no effort to hide them. This was not Elvis the entertainer. This was Elvis the man, stripped of all pretense, bleeding his soul into a song while cameras captured every devastating second. The audience responded in ways no one expected. Some people wept openly, moved by the raw vulnerability they were witnessing. Others looked away, uncomfortable with seeing their idol so exposed. A few actually left their seats, later admitting they felt like intruders on something deeply private. The energy in that auditorium shifted from entertainment to something sacred and sorrowful. Backstage, chaos erupted. Crew members recall frantic whispers and panicked phone calls. Colonel Parker was reportedly furious, demanding to know why no one was stopping this. But what could they do? Drag Elvis off stage in front of 12,000 witnesses? The cameras kept rolling because stopping them would have created an even bigger scene. So the footage accumulated, capturing every raw moment of the King's unraveling. When the song ended, Elvis stood motionless for what witnesses describe as an eternity. The applause was hesitant at first, then thunderous, as if the audience understood they had just witnessed something historic. Elvis whispered a barely audible thank you, finished the concert with a few more songs performed almost on autopilot, and walked off stage without his usual farewell theatrics. Within hours, the machinery of image control kicked into gear. Tapes were collected. Crew members were reminded of their confidentiality agreements. The official story became that the Omaha concert was unremarkable, just another stop on the tour. For 50 years, that lie held firm. But footage has a way of surviving, and someone, somewhere, decided the world deserved to see the real Elvis, not the legend, but the man. Here's what makes this footage even more devastating. What it reveals about his final weeks will haunt you. Here's the detail that transforms this footage from remarkable to absolutely haunting. That Omaha performance took place on June 19, 1977. Elvis Presley died on August 16th of that same year. 58 days. That's all the time he had left when he stood on that stage and poured his broken soul into Unchained melody. 58 days between that raw confession and the moment his heart finally gave out on the bathroom floor of Graceland. When you watch this footage, knowing that timeline, everything changes. Those tears streaming down his face weren't just emotion, they were premonition. That exhaustion in his eyes wasn't temporary fatigue. It was a man whose body was shutting down and whose spirit knew it. Elvis wasn't just performing that night, he was saying goodbye. And nobody in that audience, nobody in his crew, nobody in his inner circle understood what they were really witnessing. The people who should have protected him failed spectacularly. Colonel Tom Parker continued booking shows right up until the end, squeezing every last dollar from a dying man. The doctors surrounding Elvis kept writing prescriptions, enabling an addiction that was clearly killing him. The Memphis Mafia maintained their code of silence, prioritizing their proximity to fame over their friends' survival. Everyone saw the warning signs that night in Omaha. The footage made those signs undeniable. And still, nothing changed. This is precisely why the footage was buried. Not because it showed Elvis having a bad night, not because his voice cracked or his weight was unflattering. It was buried because it documented institutional failure. It captured proof that everyone around Elvis knew he was dying and chose to do nothing. That footage wasn't just embarrassing, it was evidence. It was a timestamp on collective negligence that contributed to the death of the most famous entertainer on the planet. The rediscovery of this footage reads like something from a thriller novel. For decades, it sat in a private collection, passed between estate sales and memorabilia dealers who either didn't understand its significance or were paid to keep quiet. Then, approximately 3 years ago, a researcher working on an Elvis documentary stumbled across references to the Omaha tapes in old production logs. The official record said they were destroyed. But the researcher kept digging. What emerged was a network of former crew members, aging collectors, and one anonymous source within the Presley estate who confirmed the footage still existed. Getting it released required legal battles, authentication processes, and negotiations with parties who had very good reasons to keep it hidden. The fact that you can now see this performance represents years of work by people committed to historical truth over manufactured legacy. The fan community has been divided since the footage surfaced. Some longtime Elvis devotees consider it sacred, a final gift from the king that reveals his authentic humanity beneath the rhinestone jumpsuits and karate moves. Others find it exploitative, arguing that Elvis deserved to have his worst moments remain private. Both perspectives miss the larger point. This footage matters because it shatters the comfortable mythology we've built around Elvis Presley. For decades, the official narrative presented his decline as sudden and unexpected. The footage proves otherwise. It shows a prolonged, visible deterioration that everyone around him witnessed and ignored. It forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about how we treat the artists we claim to love. We consumed Elvis. We demanded he perform through illness, through exhaustion, through a pharmaceutical dependency that should have landed him in treatment rather than on stage. We bought the tickets and the albums and the merchandise while his handlers worked him to death. That Omaha footage doesn't just show Elvis breaking. It shows us the machinery of fame grinding a human being into dust while thousands applauded. The larger lesson extends far beyond Graceland. We've watched this pattern repeat with artist after artist in the decades since Elvis died. The names change, but the story remains identical. Handlers who prioritize profit over well-being. Enablers who mistake access for friendship. Fans who demand more content while ignoring obvious cries for help. The Elvis footage isn't ancient history. It's a mirror reflecting how we still treat celebrities today. Strip away the king, the icon, the legend, and what remains on that Omaha stage is simply a man in extraordinary pain asking to be seen, not worshipped, not exploited, just seen as a human being who was struggling and needed help. For those few minutes during Unchained Melody, Elvis dropped every mask he'd ever worn and showed the world exactly who he was and how he was suffering. We weren't listening then. 50 years later, we finally have the chance to hear him. Elvis gave the world everything he had: his voice, his image, his health, his sanity, and ultimately, his life. And in this one performance, captured on footage that was never supposed to survive, he finally asked for something in return. He asked for understanding. He asked for compassion. He asked to be remembered as he truly was. The least we can do is honor that request. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button right now. Drop a comment telling me which Elvis song speaks to your soul. Because next week, I'm uncovering another buried moment from music history that powerful people never wanted you to see. Help me keep these stories alive. The legends deserve the truth.